Chapters 3 and 20, we're going to define money and then use quantitative theory money to derive money demand. Before we define money, it's important to understand what kind of system was in place before there was money. In the absence of money, goods and services are exchanged in a barter system where individuals directly exchange the surplus from the fruits of their labor. So, for example, Farmer Ted has 50-pound sacks of potatoes and wants or needs coffee or a horse. In a barter system, Ted has to lug around 50-pound sacks of potatoes while seeking those with extra coffee or an extra horse, and who want potatoes. If Ted is unable to find someone to make those exchanges, he has to find someone who wants potatoes and who has something that a horse owner or a coffee grower would need. Horse owners have a commodity that cannot be converted into smaller units and exchanged for something like ice cream, soda, or haircuts. The equation, which is the combinations rule in a business stats class, this equation is used to compute the number of prices needed for an end good economy. Now, X here is going to be equal to 2 because a guy with potatoes needs a horse, and she finds a horse owner that needs potatoes. That exchange has two sides to it. So X here is 2. And if we do a little simplification, n factorial, n minus 2 factorial, and 2 factorial, do some cancellation, we get the equation n times n minus 1 divided by 2. Suppose there's a for-good economy where one guy produces televisions, one guy produces laptops, one guy produces potatoes, and the last person produces coffee. According to this equation, that for-good economy would need 4 times 3 divided by 2 prices. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. So the way that works is there has to be a price for the exchange of TVs for laptops, or TVs and potatoes, TVs and coffee. For the laptop, I've already mentioned the TV to laptop price, so we don't count it. We need laptops, potatoes, laptops, coffee. Now for potatoes, I've already mentioned the exchange rate between laptops and potatoes and TVs and potatoes. So we don't want to double count that. So the final price is potatoes for coffee. And what we end up with is 6 prices. When societies were very simple, agricultural, maybe a barter system is reasonable and not too desperately inefficient. In today's world, barter system is just not workable in the least bit. Because if, for example, there's a billion products out there and there was no such thing as money, we would need a billion times basically a billion minus 1. So we basically have a billion squared divided by 2. A billion squared is a big number. Barter system is just not workable. According to Ludwig von Mises, among competing forms of money, the least marketable tend to be one by one rejected until at last only a single commodity remained, which was universally employed as a medium of exchange. Aristotle said something similar. When the inhabitants of one country become more dependent on those of another, and they imported what they needed and exported what they had too much of, money necessarily came into use. So really, money is the product of people wanting a more efficient system. Now, money has to have some properties, and those things include double coincidence. What is double coincidence? Sellers demand money for their goods, but not everyone has demand for all goods. So our seller accepts money because she believes when she needs it in the future to buy goods, it will be accepted by sellers of those goods. A buyer holds and uses money because she believes the seller of a good or service will accept it. Money has to be the unit of account, i.e., prices are quoted in terms of money. When you go to McDonald's, the Big Mac's not priced in terms of 50-pound sacks of potatoes, it's priced in dollars. Money serves as a store of value, even though it may not be a perfect store of value, because it loses value during inflation. Money is easily standardized. It is widely accepted. It is divisible. It is easy to carry. It does not deteriorate quickly. In the movie The Shawshank Redemption, inmates exchange cigarettes for posters, whiskey, and playing cards. In Time, a recent movie, it depicts a future where time is literally money that is used to purchase mortality. Many things have been money. Pots, iron coins, copper, rum, wine, corn, sheep, whale teeth, polished beads called wampum, big stones like in the Isle of Yap. Coins were first minted between 700 and 500 BC. Iron coins that hung on strings were used in Sichuan, China before the 10th century. The coins were kind of heavy and not very convenient. I can imagine somebody thinking, well, I'm going to build a fortress and we'll call it a name. And maybe that name translates to bank in English. People with all these iron coins decide, well, you know what? Instead of carrying these around, I'm going to give this fortified building my iron coins. In exchange, they were given a receipt. Now, that receipt is not unlike the coat check receipt that you get for your checking your coat at a Manhattan club. The coat check receipt is analogous to paper money in that it's redeemable in the coat that is on reserve at the coat check closet. That's very similar to the receipts that were issued to depositors of these Chinese iron coins. Now, the interesting thing is, because people were having to go to the bank to exchange their receipts, their paper receipts, which can be folded and put in their pockets, they had to run to a bank to exchange their receipts for their iron coins and then go to a business and buy something they needed. So I can imagine a situation where a guy is in a hurry, he has receipts for 10 iron coins, and he thinks to himself, man, I wonder if the store will accept my receipts instead of the 10 iron coins for that item I need. Maybe I need some flour to make noodles or something. So I can imagine the guy going to the store and say, hey, I got these receipts for 10 iron coins. Instead of me running to the bank, I'm in a hurry. Will you accept the receipts? Which you then can redeem for the iron coin. I can imagine the store owner going, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Chow Tu was the name, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, of the receipt for those Chinese iron coins. They were issued in the 10th century, Sichuan, China. When people started exchanging the paper receipts, paper money came into existence. In the 19th century America, the same thing kind of happened. You had the gold rush out in San Francisco, which is why the San Francisco 49ers are called the 49ers. So you had all these miners who were nicknamed 49ers digging for gold. And when they found gold, now they have all this gold on their person. Well, it's the Wild West. If you carry around gold coin, gold dust, gold nuggets, you might not live very long. So what you need to do is take your gold into a business that has very strong safes. And what would happen is kind of the same thing that happened in Sichuan, China, is that the bank would give you a receipt. And that receipt looked like this. Now, they don't look like today's dollars. They look like gold coins. Maybe it made people feel better about accepting this paper money. So instead of holding the gold coin, you would turn your gold coin into a bank. They'd hold it on reserve for you and then just give you these receipts, these pieces of paper. Now, because your name's not on it, whoever is the bearer of the note can then use the note to give to the bank, and the bank would give them $10 in gold coins. Carrying around a bunch of paper is much more convenient than carrying around really heavy gold that clank and announce that you are a wealthy man. In early 21st century, our currency started looking more and more like the currency we use today. It no longer looks like gold coins. Notice that at the bottom of this $10 bill, it says the bearer of this $10 bill can exchange this piece of paper for $10 in gold coin. So money was still backed by gold when this paper money was circulating in the United States. Notice how small they made that wording, as opposed to currency that looks like this. This currency says, hey, this money is backed by gold. The currency that circulates today no longer says that the dollars we carry in our pockets are redeemable in gold coin. Instead, money now has "In God We Trust" on it. So it's like government replaced the gold standard with the God standard. FDR ended the gold standard in domestic exchanges and restricted private ownership of gold with the Emergency Banking Act of 1933, Executive Order 6102, and the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. President Nixon completed the process, ending the gold standard in foreign exchanges after he issued Executive Order 11615 in 1971. Meanwhile, In God We Trust began appearing on U.S. paper money in 1957. The people that control the money in the U.S. had a long-term goal in mind: make the money not look like gold coin anymore, diminishing the idea that money could be turned in for gold, erasing it altogether, and then start putting "In God We Trust" on the currency a few years before President Nixon ended the gold standard in foreign exchanges. Hence, presidents from FDR to Nixon removed the L in gold on the dollar, which slowly transitioned the dollar from the gold standard to the God standard. Fiat money is money that is not backed by a commodity like gold in the United States or iron coins in Sichuan, China. Instead, it's money that government decrees is money. In other words, say you got fined by a government official for doing something that violated some regulation. You could use your fiat money to pay the fine. Or if you work for government, the government's going to pay you in their fiat money. Or if you owe income taxes, all those taxes can be paid with this fiat money. Government may say that the only money that we will accept for taxes or fines is our fiat money that we print. So you kind of have no choice but to use the government's fiat money. The US was not the first fiat currency. When the Sichuan government took control of the Chao II in 1023, the Chao II became the world's first fiat money. In 1931, the British pound became fiat money. Today, money is in the form of checks, electronic payments, e-money, like debit card, stored value card, e-cash. So are we headed for a cashless society? Predictions of a cashless society have been around for decades, but they have not come to fruition. Although e-money might be more convenient and efficient than a payment system based on paper, there are a lot of factors that work against the disappearance of the paper system. Still, the use of e-money will likely increase in the future. In Louisiana, apparently, Louisiana House Bill 185 bans cash on all second-hand transactions, which passed near unanimously with one nay vote in the Louisiana Senate. If you watch these two YouTube videos here, you can see how upset the people in Louisiana are as a result of this legislation. So if you're living in Louisiana and you found some stuff in your attic and you decide to sell it in a yard sale or sell it at a pawn shop, apparently if you accept cash, you've broken the law in Louisiana. For government officials, the Federal Reserve, Treasury, there are two main types of money. Money is the currency that is in circulation. In May of 2011, there was about $1 trillion of currency circulating in the economy. When you add that to the value of travelers' checks, which was 4.6 in May of 2011, demand deposits, which totaled $573.1 billion, just over $500 billion, and $399 billion in other checkable deposits. The total amount of M1 money is nearly $2 trillion. Now M2 is that nearly $2 trillion of M1 plus small denomination time deposits, which are almost $1 billion, plus savings deposits and money market deposit accounts, which, wow, $5.5 trillion, plus money market mutual fund shares, which were just under $1 trillion. Total M2 then is basically this $2 trillion plus nearly $1 trillion plus $5.5 trillion plus $0.7 trillion. And you get a total M2 of $9 trillion. This chart shows the growth rate of M2 and M1 through time. Now, before 1980, the volatility in M2 is very volatile. The growth rate was up and was way down, way up, way down, way up, way down. As opposed to the growth rate in M1, it was more steady in the 60s, 70s. Something happened in the 1980s because inflation was rising and accelerating. Volcker was instructed basically to get inflation under control. In the late 1970s, early 1980s, the federal funds rate at some point was almost 20%, contrasted to the 0% it is basically at today. Quite the change. But inflation expectations subsided during the 1980s. From that point on, it looks like M1's growth rate is more volatile, up and down, up and down, up and down, than is M2's growth rate. So M2 is a little bit more stable than M1's growth rate. Are they still strongly correlated? It looks like when M1 growth rate is high, M2 growth rate is high. When M2 growth rate is low, M1 growth rate is low, with the exception of maybe the early to mid 1990s. Then about 1997, looks like they kind of start tracking together again. But one conclusion is for sure, something happened in the 1980s that made M1 growth more volatile. So if a Federal Reserve Chairman decides to follow Milton Friedman's rule of slow, predictable, steady money growth, do they target M2? Do they target M1? Now, I think Paul Volcker, picked by President Carter, is the least worst Federal Reserve Chairman. And I say that because he targeted reserves, not M1, not M2. As a result of targeting reserves, he was able to tame the inflation expectations that were accelerating in the 1970s. So in conclusion, the choice of monetary aggregate is very important for policymakers. Now in the US, each person holds only about $2,000 of currency. Most of that is held by criminals and foreigners, so that's kind of interesting. Now here's an interesting graph. This shows the recent effects of monetary policy on M1, M2, and the monetary base. Notice that the monetary base blips up in 2000, right before the Y2K scare. The big thing back in the year 2000 because computers at the time were feared to fail on the year 2000 because computers were built with a 2-digit date. There was a lot of money spent on changing out servers and computers in the year 2000. So I think that's why there's that little bit of a blip in the monetary base. But then, boom, there's an explosion in the monetary base. In 1981, the monetary base was small. It looks like it was about $150 billion, whereas M1 was about $410 billion. Today, the monetary base is about 3.3 trillion, while M1 is only maybe 2 trillion. So the monetary base is now larger than M1. It still has a ways to go to equal the amount of M2. M2 is about $10.5 trillion. So the monetary base is about, what, a third of M2. and 1.5 times larger than M1. In Chapter 20, we use the quantity theory of money to derive money demand. The quantity theory of money comes from the Fisher equation of exchange. Keynes built on that for his money demand equation, liquidity preference theory, and then Friedman revisited Fisher and critiqued Keynes' view on money. The Fisher equation is kind of a really cool relationship that intuitively explains where inflation comes from. It comes from, according to Milton Friedman, an excessive growth rate in money. Now this comes from an Irving Fisher 1911 publication called The Purchasing Power of Money. P is the price level. Y is real GDP. If output is valued in base year prices, then as output increases from year to year, we're holding the prices constant. So this is real GDP, and together these make up nominal GDP. M is the quantity of money. V is the velocity of money. The number of times a $1 bill is used to buy products in a specific period of time. Now the quantity theory of money assumes that velocity is constant.